to start with a meditation, so please achieve comfort, alignment and control. We are told that as man thinks in his heart, so is he. And this is an occult statement of fact. Please find a comfortable, relaxed position. Take a few slow, deep, and quiet breaths. Find emotional stillness. Let go of any stress or worries. Attempt to be simply here now. Imagine your emotions are like a still pond of clear and pure waters. Then say 3 times to yourself, I, the observer, stand and see things flow. The mind is an instrument used by the thinker. Say, I see thoughts like clouds come and go, but I just observe. Recognize that you are the soul, the observer, an expression of love and light. Visualize a pure white light pouring down from the eternal, over the shadowing soul, flooding all the personality, stabilizing, purifying, quieting, and directing it in service. Then say, may the energy of the Divine Self inspire me and the light of the soul direct. May I, through that spiritual energy, which is my higher self, be led from darkness to light, from the unreal to the real, from mortality to immortality. embraced with our divine self, we remain in stillness. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again. Each of us here is an honest seeker, a student of the ancient wisdom, striving in our unique ways to integrate the insights gained from reflection and study into our lives. This process may be different in method and intensity, influenced, as it should be, by the distinct circumstances, limitations, possibilities of each individual's life. Circumstances that likely differ in each incarnation, each being but a fleeting moment in the journey of our souls. Of these different methods or paths, we are going to speak today, as they are the first issue that comes up in the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. Sometimes we entertain the idea that certain events or gatherings, such as this one, may be indicative of what we term synchronicity. This inclination stems from our belief in an ordered cosmos, one not governed by chance, but rather shaped by the thoughts of a higher mind, one with a plan for the universe, a blueprint for the universe. And within this grand design, the human kingdom plays a part. And we conceive that the occurrences on our modest and small planet are but fragments of a broader plan that spans systems and galaxies, reaching beyond the limits of our comprehension. Yet, on the individual scale of our existence, I believe each of us has earnestly questioned at some point, what is my task? What is my function, my mission in this life? Basically, what am I doing here? Am I on the right path? There's an underlying sense that there is a plan for each of us within this cycle. However, for our personalities to catch a glimpse of a plan devised by our inner being for this incarnation is no easy task, as we know. Occasionally we find ourselves confused, perplexed by all those who, at least on the surface, seem confident in their actions or perspectives. It is not uncommon for us to listen to speakers whom we regard as authorities, believing that they can illuminate the way for us instead of turning inward for answers. This tendency is observed even in spiritual institutions where certain individuals are deemed spiritual authorities. It's worth noting that the great spiritual pioneers urged us to subject all teachings to verification, and most importantly, to introspectively discover the true meaning of the path that resonates with each of us. This approach stands in contrast to assigning the role of a paternal authority to external figures and blindly adhering to externally imposed precepts. So, in the presence of articulate and impassioned speakers, there's sometimes a lingering impression that there's only one correct way of doing things or of understanding an issue. While we may pay lip service to the notion that many paths lead to Rome, our actions indicate a belief in only one true path. This tendency can lead to the application of labels, judgments, criticisms, such as being labeled as too intellectual, practical, devotional, and many other things worse than that. Yet the fundamental truth remains. Everyone possesses their unique set of energies to work with and their own nature to navigate. What I said does not imply denying that there are certain universal principles that are indisputable, and perhaps discernment is needed to understand the difference. Also accepting that on this path there are ancient rules that have been transmitted by those who have trodden the path before us and managed to cross to the other shore, as the great text Dhammapada says, is something that challenges us at every step of our development process. And the Yoga Sutras themselves begin by establishing the basic and preliminary rules, while HPB states that outside those ancient rules, we can be knocking on the door for ages, saying abracadabra and open sesame, and they will not open. But all those great thinkers and teachers never ignored the fact that we are made up of different set of energies, each one of us. At the level of the development of consciousness, a similar situation exists. There are people who develop through the direct application of the will, others through meditation and expansion of consciousness till they embrace unity. Others find their way in areas of concrete knowledge, devotion, or the more ritual aspects. They can be seen active in different areas of life: government, education, religion, science, art, to name but just a few. Others choose to remain unknown, working only from within. In fact, we're told that there are ashrams or internal groups of different notes or qualities and with different fields of world service to which each disciple enters according to his ray constitution and innate predispositions once she or he becomes an accepted disciple. But this is not only an individual matter. Those who appreciate music often recognize that the pleasure derived from good music, the emotions music evokes, and the sense of cosmic order it reflects don't stem from isolated and disconnected sounds. Rather, it emerges from the mysterious relationships established between each sound and others. Similar to the universe, music operates on the concept of hierarchy, where each sound serves its designated function within the broader system. In contemporary times, there's a resistance to this idea, often labeled as patriarchal. It's interesting to note that the universe is described as sevenfold, and to visualize this, one can think of a keyboard of a piano. By the way, H.P. Blavatsky was a gifted pianist herself. She had received lessons from Moscheles, a noted pianist composer of the time, which suggests, Olcott says this, that she might have once considered earning a living as a professional pianist. This is in Old Diary Leaves, written by Olcott. She believed thus that, as the ancient Pythagoreans claim, the music was a universe and the universe was music, and that sound had a tremendous power, enough to raise the great pyramid of Cheops in the air, she said, in the Secret Doctrine. The musical scale has 7 basic notes, and no wonder the musical scale is structured in this way, because from Pythagoras on, and maybe from earlier, the cosmos is conceived as a musical instrument which plays the music of the spheres. Being a part of the cosmos, it's easy to conceptualize that we resonate with, essentially embodying one of those 7 fundamental notes. In this cosmic hierarchy, each soul aligns with a particular note. In the grand symphony of existence, certain notes play pivotal roles, initiating or concluding a piece of music or reaching a climactic moment. At other times, a note serves a smaller and yet subtler and essential purpose, connecting, uniting, forming a delicate bridge between one section and the other. These seemingly modest contributions can be so beautiful and subtle that they never fail to capture the attention of a discerning listener. There we realize the beauty lies in interrelation, that no one is isolated, that we can only define ourselves and truly know what our energy is in the monumental interweaving of relationships that we establish every single day. Let us have this principle in our minds, never mind how obvious it may seem. There's only music in the interrelation of sounds, never in isolated sounds. Sometimes obvious statements are excellent to hide deep truths in them. Its apparently obvious nature tempts the mind into overlooking what may become groundbreaking thoughts. Many times we read, for example, the Secret Doctrine, and we affirm with conviction that this universe is sevenfold. But we fail to see it reflected in that framework of our relationships. The occult doctrine calls the septenary of energies rays. Our solar system responds to a node or ray which is in harmony or counterpoint with other solar systems that our mind cannot conceive. Our planet has a node, as does humanity, the kingdoms, and the soul of each individual belongs to a ray, node, color, internal group, which is actually saying the same thing. But we would be naive if we thought that there are only 7 types of people in the world who respond to the 7 rays. It would be just as absurd as thinking that there are only 12 types of individuals, each individual for each sign of the zodiac, for instance. Each soul has a journey of thousands of years, thousands of incarnations behind it. And although it responds to a basic note or ray that it only discovers at a very advanced stage, according to HPB statement, its experiences have colored its aura with millions of subtle and not so subtle nuances of colors and sounds. We are each a chord, a musical composition, and our progress consists in a certain way in resolving dissonances into consonances, in painting more diaphanous and crystalline colors, in becoming a true work of art, and this both as individuals, as a group, as a nation, and as humanity. In a way, what we call progress consists of synthesizing, resolving all the colors of a different rays that color our personality, our monkey-like personality, let me say, into the simple and pure ray or note of the inner being. This is why the ancient Delphic precept is always the starting point. Knowing oneself is a process that is done little by little, removing layer after layer, and each of us in that process being paradoxically more and more what we essentially already are, that fundamental note. However, here and now, our instrument has its individual chord, and this particular canvas of colors necessarily implies that each of us has our line of least resistance, that certain things are easier for us, while others are more difficult. Have we ever ask ourselves why things are so easy for a certain person within a certain field, while they're so difficult for us. Just let us think about common everyday situations connected with our personal life. How easy it is for this guy to make money. How easy it is for this guy to find a partner and I'm alone. I remember that a classmate from the School of Arts learned to play a piece on the piano in a few hours, while the same piece took me months of practice. And on top of that, it turned out that she played it better. Much better, in fact. On a more internal level, we also observe that certain individuals have emotional stability and an inner thread of spiritual tension, which allows them to meditate regularly. While in other people, a hectic and chaotic life drives them like the wind here and there. Is it bad? No. The fact that prevents any judgment or criticism is that we are seeing only a snapshot, a cross-section in an infinite chains of cycles of each soul. Indeed, there are those for whom action flows effortlessly, while others find their natural inclination in study. Some are drawn to spiritual meditation, some to devotion. Certain individuals have integrated 2 or even 3 of these dimensions. However, the fundamental truth remains that only each individual can truly discern and know their own dharma, or right path. So, our task today is to reflect on how the Bhagavad Gita describes these different paths. Let us recreate in our minds the scenery. 2 armies confronted and the fight is about to be launched. But Arjuna, before he sounds the horn, refuses to engage in battle. Na yotsya, I will not fight, he cries. Krishna, seeing that he refused to take his weapons, tells him to drop that cowardly attitude and begins to whisper the deepest teaching about right action and thought, about dharma. And begins to whisper, duty and the path. In other words, I said about dharma, a very important word which, in my opinion, synthesizes the whole Bhagavad Gita, dharma. He tells him that victory and defeat are the same. He urges him to act, but not to reflect on the fruit of the action. If you're a warrior, a kshatriya, you must do your duty, your dharma, namely to fight, even if it means killing your family. Once you have made pleasure and pain, gain and loss, victory and defeat the same, then you will be ready for battle, Krishna says. So what we call detachment is one of the first fundamental topics that emerges from the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. Being detached from the outer world of phenomena involves a transcendental recognition that we essentially are an observer, a thinker, a seer, and that although we identify ourselves with our ideas and identity, these are but just the outer layers of the mind. And interesting to know that in the Bhagavad Gita, the seer is the word drishta, and every other thing, the object is drishya, that which is seen. So the Bhagavad Gita and in Patanjali solves the whole thing by using drishta, the seer, and drishya, the seen. Same root, same word. And then it is said that the senses are great. Greater than the senses is the mind. Greater than the mind is pure reason, that is, buddhi. But what is greater than reason is he, the supreme. It means Atman. In other words, there's so much beyond the mind. And this leads us into the very first subject that comes up in the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, the topic of the path of knowledge, jnana in Sanskrit, represented by the oldest doctrine in all India, the Sankhya. The role of knowledge in our spiritual quest often invites scrutiny, and there's a tendency to cast judgment on those perceived as too intellectual. I've seen that every day. The ambiguity lies in what exactly we mean by this term intellectual. Is it a critique that the person is not practical enough? Does knowledge potentially inflate the personal ego, fostering arrogance? It's important to recognize that true intellectual depth extends far beyond the mere act of reading a book, acquiring information, and delivering a lecture. Unfortunately, in contemporary times, we encounter individuals who read a couple of books on a subject, say astrology, and swiftly embark on a career as a professional. We see that on the web, don't we? The first cry of the soul when it awakens, so where's the risk here? Of what risk are we talking about? Let's examine it impersonally. The first cry of the soul when it awakens to a dim perception of the eternal is for a coherent scheme of principles by which it may explain to itself its new knowledge. But there's a danger too in the demand for a detailed explanation, a danger that the original intuitive perception may be swamped by the clear-cut intellectual expression, a danger to that mere knowledge divorced from the love and activity that are the other aspects of the path may be considered as the whole thing. At first we get excited, we know that. At first we get excited about these explanations, which resonate so much within us. But sooner or later, it is a substitute, a symbol of the true knowledge or wisdom of the soul. In reality, it is the disciple who is confused by demanding a fixed scheme of knowledge. A true master never does that. Schematic knowledge only serves the function of calming the mind and preparing it for what is truly important, direct intuitive knowledge. That knowledge that, as the Bhagavad Gita says, once known, nothing more needs to be known. The main hindrance on accessing it consists of the feeling of knowing because I have studied, or because, having obtained a small measure of light, we frequently mistake that little flame for the supreme fire, and we think we have found that supreme fire. No, just a tip of the veil had been was risen. He's not in the Kena Upanishad we read, he is not known by him who knows, and he is known by him who does not know. Let's not freak out. This is just a somewhat enigmatic way of saying that knowledge that can be expressed in words is not true knowledge, although it can be a way to access that true knowledge. Plato himself stated it in his 7th letter, a letter he wrote when he was in Syracuse. Someone said to Plato, "Look, this guy is trying to write things that you say." And he said, "My doctrine cannot be written in words. Otherwise it wouldn't be my doctrine. My doctrine rather arises as a spark from the soul." And not only that, it only arises within a communion of souls, synousia in Greek. Only that the spark of the soul can just emerge. The difference between knowledge written in words and true knowledge is the same as that between a real landscape in 3 dimensions and a map of it in 2 dimensions. Okay, you will rightly say, true, but that perception for us now, here, is not a reality, but it is useful to recognize it as a goal. And it implies that here and now, that it must be our effort not to be fooled by appearances and form, and to strive to reach beyond to the world of causes of the essential as a daily practice. This is why where meditation comes in as a real instrument. So, which is the way then to true knowledge? Krishna clearly states that the nature of manas must cease to be united with the senses, so do the Yoga Sutras, and turn its focus towards the highest within oneself, thus weaving that path in consciousness called antahkarana, which is the path itself, in which we do not tread, but which we actually become. We do not tread the path, we become the path. This is a process that the jnani yogi carries out, according to Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, of using the energy of the love of the soul as fuel to weave that path from the intellect to intuition. Now, it is easy to say, unite the mind with the buddhi, but usually such words have but little meaning for us, since we have as yet had no full experience of the buddhi, and we do not know yet what it really is. Moreover, the mind remains obstinately separate and will not suffer itself to be united with anything in reality. In chapter 2, in reply to Arjuna's question about the characteristics of the man who has united with the buddhi, Shri Krishna describes how the disciple, uniting himself with the felt reality within, must detach himself from the desire life of the senses, as a turtle withdraws its limbs from contact with the outer world. Mere withdrawal is, however, not enough. As tempted as we may be, given the state of the world on the verge of war. For though the sense objects lose their power over the man who habitually practices restraint, yet the desire for them remains in his heart and dies only when something higher than the sense life is actually perceived and seen. So, before we dismiss the concept of man as being allied with the senses as overly theoretical, let's consider a scenario not only related to study but also to our everyday life. Krishnamurti delved deeply into this matter. Let's imagine a situation where we come across something that stimulates our senses in any aspect, in any respect. We see something. A primary feeling of desire emerges as a response. Desire on its own is a neutral thing. It's a universal substance, not inherently good nor evil. Desire is just that, desire. On a higher level, the Logos, the deity, experiences a form of desire or thirst, trishna in Sanskrit, a desire to incarnate and be immersed in form, giving rise to the manifested cosmos. It's a form of desire on another level. However, as soon as we experience this feeling or desire, who comes in and enters the scene? Thought. The mind begins to create a thought form, an image of that object. As human beings, we do not merely desire dot. We desire something, referred to as direct object in grammar, isn't it? This something we desire, which takes on a clear mental form that we wish to possess, retain, recreate, or avoid if it hurts us, is, if we can grasp it, primarily a thought form on the screen of the mind. It is a movement of mental matter in response to an external stimulus. Knowing what that object outside of us truly essentially is. A point, by the way, that modern science aligns with now. Think about that, how objects of desire from a certain point of view are the creation of the mind. So can we really isolate desire and consider it apart from the mind? At this stage, as human beings, we cannot. The lower mind, that portion of the mind that is committed and subject to form and produces definite images or pictures, that mind which creates a language for us to communicate and interrelate, that aspect of the universal mind is attached to our desires, to our vehicle of desire, called astral body by the theosophical literature. They work together. Kama manas means exactly that. Kama in Sanskrit means desire. It's the same word as eros in Greek. We have the word erotic. Eros, a primordial force, which is not born from the Olympics. It is born from the chaos, the primeval chaos. It's higher than the gods themselves. Even in mythology, this is kama in Sanskrit, and manas, the energy of the mind, an energy said by Blavatsky to be a great mystery, by the way. Do not simply translate it as mind. When we talk about a mystery, as manas is said to be, we can think of the Greek word mysterion, from which it derives. Its root is the verb myein, myo, meaning to close one's eyes, as in the presence of something we cannot comprehend, as in the presence of a dazzling light. Dazzling light. This is the word, the meaning of the word mystery in Greek. Close your eyes, trying to avoid that dazzling light we have in front of us. It is a word used in the ancient mysteries. So now, as an intermediary between, as an intermediary between the higher and the lower, spirit and matter, as a focus on which spirit can reflect into matter, the mind has the possibility of turning its focus upwards, so to say. We tend to that as we bypass desire and its effects and try to reach out towards the inner causes of all events. From time to time, we experience a flash of intuition as we were able to understand the blueprints of thought. Does it not occur to you that upon reading a book, some statement, typically from the Secret Doctrine, seems impossible to understand? We read it once, twice, 3 times, 10 times. No case, we don't understand that. And all of a sudden, when our mind disengages itself from that anguish of not being able to go further, an inflow, let's call it a precipitated idea, instills into our physical brain, physical meaning etheric brain, of course, and we do finally understand, at least partially. We never know if we understand completely anything at this stage. Those eureka moments can be mistaken, of course, for great discoveries. Eureka, do you know what it means in Greek? Heureka in Greek means, I have found. And again, we too often mistake a spark. The mind is really naughty. Let us say it. The mind is naughty. Too often we mistake a spark of divinity for the eternal flame without realizing that, as always, only a tip of the veil has been lifted. The question is whether all these efforts in learning to read, understand, reflect, meditate, lead eventually the mind to open the window, open the channel, and allow a constant flow of intuition. When that happens, the mind detaches itself naturally from the senses and is illumined by the Buddhic nature. And each step made in terms of stilling our minds allows a tiny thread of a lighted bridge between the lower and the higher mind be woven. I had a friend who always repeated to me, so many things happen on a higher levels that we are not aware of as personality. And I think that hides a deep meaning. So many things happen on certain levels that we are not aware of. Sometimes we think we're not making any progress whatsoever. But we are. We may be, at least. And Krishna describes to Arjuna the qualities of a human being whose mind was united with the Buddhi. Curiously, he uses the analogy of a high place, in Sanskrit, kuta sthita, that is on a summit, on a high rock. This sense of altitude pointing to an unwavering position in spiritual realms. The image of a tall mountaintop is just a symbol as we can guess. No one is saying that we need to retreat to a solitary place on the top of a mountain, as tempted as we may be at times given the dire crisis we're going through and the state of the world on the verge of war. No, but it's not the point. We can think of a disciple who keeps his mind steady in the light of the soul and acts from that place. And can we imagine how different our lives would be should we be able to sustain our center of consciousness on that symbolically high point while we perform every duty, cooking, teaching, living, or drinking water? So here our minds run the risk of taking the matter too far and imagine an accomplished yogi, a great initiate, but not necessarily, because the whole problem is about attention. Enough hints from those who pass to the other shore suggest that all higher states of being are but expansions of that complete awareness that we can exercise every day in our own place and environment. By being here and now, this is important as we sometimes indulge in wild imagination about mental powers and psychic powers of great initiates. But the texts about yoga, such as the Yoga Sutras, set the starting point of those developments in a silent state of mind and deep awareness and observation. Yogaschitta vritti nirodha. Here's Atha Yoganushasanam. Here is an instruction on the union. Then the second one, Yogaschitta vritti nirodha. Yoga, what is yoga? What is this union? It's the suppression of the movements of the mind. Preliminary states. Everything follows that. The stillness of the mind. So the mind flooded with Buddhic energy may not be a far-fetched goal after all. And by the way to higher knowledge would be at hand if we just started from a basic daily attitude of being alert and of paying attention. Again, easily said, but it is a skill which can take a whole life to unfold. In a mysterious way, attention is linked with self-forgetfulness and love. By an increased awareness, the surrounding need stands revealed. And so the Gita puts knowledge in its right place. It reminds us that the great need is not academic or scholarly expertise. In a way, we must become experts in the life of the soul, represented by Krishna. What Arjuna's story is telling us is that we must eventually undertake the great transition and experiment, let's call it that way, experiment, and add our own testimony to the truth of the statements of the mystics and occultists of all time. To that experiment, Radha Bernier called the great revolution that must take place inside our own minds. So we come now to the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, but maybe now, if you have questions or comments so far, before we go into the path of action, which is highly critical too. Marcela, could you tell me the time, please?
4 to 11.
Great. Yeah. Sorry. Who? Does anyone want to say anything? I don't mean to sound intimidating. No, just please go on. Yeah.
I could say that prior to the time where Arjuna finds himself that he doesn't want to enter into the battle, there is an effort that comes before that. A recognition of all the parts, all the groups, all his family, representing symbolically all the different parts of himself. And his mind works out who these people are and finds them within himself. But then he finds that his mind at that point cannot find what to do, or who he is. He cannot, his mind gives up, and he appeals to Krishna. So there has to be an effort before that can be achieved. And without that effort, it's not a free gift. We have to work at it. And it's only when he appeals to Krishna that he gains the intuition and works with a different illumination rather than simply the mind as we normally use it.
I call that point, that moment, a crisis of adjustment, because one sees another goal, and then all the adjustments that have to be made stand so clearly in mind, and there's a crisis. We must adjust our perspective of the world. And so Krishna may be at one side, but it's, as you said, it's our effort.
And then the effort, you also suggested earlier that we must make this immense effort to understand and then to kind of drop it, because then at that moment there the grace, the illumination descends. Is that what you were...
And that drop in stage is the most difficult, when we have to move on and just let go. Mm-hmm. That is why the underlying theme is always detachment. And so we come to that now, because when we come to the third chapter, and this chapter begins with the disciple in doubt, Arjuna says, if you think that knowledge is superior to action, why do you urge me to this terrible deed of killing people? You know, the tension between knowledge and action is the central theme in the Bhagavad Gita, in my opinion at least. And it is closely connected with what I said about dharma. And small wonder that the disciple is confused. Nevertheless, the teaching the teaching itself is not confusing. It is only that the disciple, in demanding a clear-cut presentation which shall be decisive and final, is looking for something that cannot be given, simply. The method of a true teacher is not to overwhelm the mind by demanding assent to an intellectual scheme clearly formulated once and for all. Of this we will speak tomorrow, the concept of faith, Shraddha, in the Bhagavad Gita. Such an assent, even if given, is entirely useless, as it does not lift the disciple above the level of the thinking mind. Rather, he aims, by setting forth apparently conflicting, by actually complementary aspects of truth, at forcing the disciple to transcend the ordinary levels of thinking by resorting to the higher intuitive knowledge of the Buddhi, and thus bringing to birth in his soul a new and synthetic knowledge which shall be built into his very being. In other words, he puts the disciple in serious conflict and trouble. But the fact is that Krishna never said that knowledge is superior to action. After praising the virtues of the true knowledge, he urges the need for action. After all, the Bhagavad Gita itself begins with Krishna encouraging Arjuna to throw himself into the fight, that is, to take action. In answer to this disciple's query, the teacher states that since the beginning of all time, there have been two main types of aspirants, corresponding to the duality that pervades the manifested world. Modern psychology speaks of introverts, or those whose natural tendency is to occupy themselves with the subjective aspects, and extroverts, or those whose natural flow of energy is directed towards the outer world. Corresponding to these, we have the yoga of knowledge practiced by the Sankhyas in India, and the yoga of action practiced by the karma yogis. Urged on by the lack of balance in their own natures, one-sided exponents always attempt to show that one of these is a chief teaching and the other only secondary or subsidiary. The doctrine of karma yoga, the path of action, is based on the simple fact that the cessation of all action is impossible in the universe, because everything is vibration. There's an eternal duration, which is an eternal movement. It may seem quiet and steady, just as the wheel seems steady when it is, moving. But action, conceived in all its depth, is not as simple as saying, I am an individual of action, and throwing myself into activity. Krishna reveals that it is complex for the mind to conceive this topic of action. What is action? What is inaction? Kim karma? Kim akarma? Krishna himself asks. He also adds, even the wise do not know. Okay. Difficult, mysterious is the path of action, says Krishna. Until now, we are in trouble. If not even the wise can understand it, but then an apparent clue arrives. He who sees inaction in action, and action in inaction, he is wise among men. It still sounds a little enigmatic, but if we translate it another way, as I said yesterday, the words in Sanskrit lend themselves to that possibility. Perhaps it will clarify a little. He who sees silence in action and action in silence, he is wise among men. So action in inaction is, in other terms, action without desire. This is one of the possible, by the way, this is one of the possible meanings of Socrates' last words before he took the hemlock. As we read in Plato's dialogue, Phaedo or Phaedo, he tells his disciples, don't forget to sacrifice a rooster to Asclepius. What the hell? He didn't believe in the gods. Two strange words by someone who frowned upon the gods of Greek myth and discredited silly sacrifice rituals. He simply meant that it was the right thing to do at that moment, independently of his own conceptions. It has to be done because the law dictated that. So these sages rightly perceived that the binding power came not from the action itself, but from the desire with which it was performed, and therefore taught that if the latter could be eliminated, the poison fangs of the acts would have been removed. And this is truly detachment. Krishna, seeing that Arjuna refused to take up his weapons and fight, urges him, but not to reflect on the fruit of the action, phalam in Sanskrit. Yeah, Sanskrit is a little hard to speak. It takes, whenever you see H, the letter H between consonants, it means that you have to use the double R in pronouncing. So you don't say phalam, but phalam. Okay. But then to act without desire. It is in this sense that action is accompanied, as we said, by silence. But Arjuna is confused. How can one seek detachment and yet be compelled to slaughter, to kill? So Krishna says that in the midst of action, one must remain free from all attachment. Why? Because to the wise, a cultured and learned man, he is equal to a cow, an elephant, and even a dog and an outcast. Wonderful, isn't it? We may wonder what it means for us today to regard a learned man equal to a cow. Well, yeah, literally. What does it mean? So, no matter how obvious this question may sound, for we know the answer, let us ponder a little on it. Behind the obvious, great answers lie. Are all human beings equal or not? Are we? If we are, in what sense? This is no stupid question, and we must have the right answer to it. What the Bhagavad Gita is implying here is that in spite of all external differences, all human beings are equal in origin, goal, and opportunity. Essentially, we are the same, but each one of us must do our own dharma. Each one has its unique path to follow. We are little universes, reflections of a great flame. Under this mode of perceiving which goes beyond appearance, the sage is really equal to a cow and endowed with the same rights, because both a sage and a cow are expressions of the one life. So the topic of action turns out to be of great importance. As once action is performed, then our duty is to let go of results and move on. In a way, our own distorted sense of separate self comes from the result we expect from our actions. Think about it. We generally act according to preconceptions. The feeling of an individual self is created through the accumulation of separated fragments gathered over the course of life, picked up on the way, including ideas from various sources, familiar perspectives, cultural norms of our communities, and even misconceptions we harbor about ourselves. An illusion of a complete and well-rounded identity is thus fabricated, which we defend and proudly present as our. I am that. Well, not in the sense of a mantra, soham, no. I am this thing. Through this crafted image, our interactions with others become intricate, making it difficult for each encounter to be truly fresh. As all relationships are shaped by the past, and inevitably by preconceptions. The persona we wear as a mask is a historical product, a compilation of thousands of actions performed, acquired biases and opinions primarily generated to maintain the illusion of a sense of self and, of course, prevent its dissolution. We fear death. The illusion dissipates, according to Krishna, as soon as the personality recognizes itself as an instrument of something higher. And Sri Krishna proclaims that the action is equivalent to sacrifice. We have such a distorted idea of sacrifice fostered by the church. Let's say it. What is that sacrifice demanded by Krishna? We might, yajna in Sanskrit, we might speculate the sensors and the lower mind, that is the personality, the psychic structure, that which we call our identity, that sense of I, must be sacrificed to the higher mind, establishing on that plane that path of light toward Buddhi, intuition. It is not that individuality disappears. Far from it. It simply consists of taking its place as an instrument, as a vehicle of the superior. This is when the human being truly becomes a center of light and love. Well, any comments now? Otherwise we have a break now. I need 3 minutes more to talk briefly about the path of devotion, and then Marcela will talk about the path of meditation, no less. You're quiet today. Okay, please.
This is terrific. We're all really very interested. When I was in college, I had a literature professor, and he said something rather sarcastic to the students, but he meant it also. If you want to write a great novel, write a great poem, make a great film, think of the simplest, dumbest truth you can imagine. We are all one. And then obscure it. Then put one veil over another veil over another veil over this very simple truth. So you make the reader remove this veil, remove that veil, to get to this core thing. If you want to just communicate we are all one, as Jack Warner said, the famous film producer, just send a telegram. We're all one. But if you want to make great art, obscure the whole thing. So these religious texts, the Quran, the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, they're full of veils. Are they covering a single truth? Or is the veil itself creating an ambiguous, multifaceted core truth? In that way, searchers from all different angles can take what they want out of it. So I guess my question is, in the core of the Bhagavad Gita, is there an immutable truth that could be expressed very simply? And you've tried to do that several times. Not sure if that's your interpretation or not.
Exactly.
You know. Yeah. So I'm struggling here with the question. What's going on here?
That we shouldn't focus on the goal, but on the process. Maybe you have said that the whole novel or film was about unveiling, the process of unveiling. Then when we come to that truth, it's the end of a movie, it's the end of a book. So maybe what they are trying to emphasize is the process of discovery. This is what they're trying to sort of highlight. Because, why? Because once we find and we reach the goal, another horizon opens up, and we have another goal, and the process starts again.
So the goal.
So that thing is the process, the path.
So the goal, the core truth, is something like the zero in mathematics.
Exactly.
It really doesn't.
Exactly.
It's the process of getting to that core truth that we go through. The unveiling is the point. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. You know, if you have read the Mahatma letters, In one of the letters, the Master M says that he was hilarious because everything considered the Masters as something so huge and high and uplifted. And they say we're simple disciples. What he meant is that once you are a great initiate, then you actually become a humble disciple on another level. You're looking for the soul, you know, what they call third initiation. Then you come there, and then the soul is just another vehicle to be cast off because you find another horizon, the monad. And we have to start all over again, the process, until we get to that point, and then who knows?
So there is no other shore specifically.
It's a figure of speech.
But it's also, and excuse my coarse
Yeah, of
language
course.
here, it's also kind of a sales job. You know, oh, there is a goal here. You know, keep working. So they're selling something that is really illusory. That's not the point. Because they're not selling a journey. I'm speaking crudely here.
They're
but-
selling religion is what
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
selling.
I'm using the word selling as
Okay,
of course. But,
go on.
But it's almost sort of an illusory goal. We're promising you something, and just keep traveling toward it. So there is a kind of
Well,
a
but
paradox there. a little
there's
bit.
always a higher and increasing degree of satya, or of truth. It's not that it's always illusory. But you know how many layers you have to cast off, you don't know, because it's always an increasing level. But in a way, when we're too worried about that goal, in a way it means that another thing that may be hard to understand, that this process is not someone that we ambitiously look for, that it comes naturally as an unfoldment, as a flower opens to the sun. It's not that we are trying to force the bud to open, because that would be personal ambition. So this is a tricky part, I think. But I insist that it's a whole, what the ancient texts tell us is that they highlight the path, the process, as not something like, you know, we have mythical images of a hero, you know, going through the wood and chopping down all the trees. Well, that's only a rhetoric figure of speech. It's casting layer after layer and becoming what we already are, and we coming to the point that we embody what we are, incarnate what we are essentially. And that is what they call initiate, because he has gone through that process. And of course, that initiate on his own level is a humble disciple looking for another goal. I mean, it has to be that way, because we cannot put limits on this cosmos. Well, that's my view. I don't know. That's how I got to understand the thing. But I don't know. For the present, I stick to this. I don't know in 10 years, right? But thank you. Thank you. Well, break. Sorry, Susan.
Well, I was just going to say, it seems like that kind of seeking is comparative. It's like we're trying to get somewhere, to be someone, to compare ourselves to others, or to find that, coast, like when can we just relax? And I think those are both, we just have to enjoy the dance.
Enjoy the dance. I like that.
I heard a great phrase the other day, the arrival fallacy. Have you all heard this? Mm-hmm. The arrival fallacy. I thought that's a terrific phrase. I think that's kind of what you're alluding to.
Arrival
Yes.
fallacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's never a true arrival.
No. But we live that way. We almost,
Well, we are tempted like the carrot, the horse is tempted by a carrot, it's always in front of it.
But that puts so much tension in it,
Yeah.
when it could just be fun.
I think we should pay attention to that word tension, because we think that tension is something physical, and it's very understood spiritually that word is key. To maintain a... sorry?
Sorry, I interrupted.
No.
It has no limits.
It has no limits.
I mean, once you achieved one step, there will be another, as you said, and the work of the soul has no limits. So, and we don't even think of how it's going to be defined. There will be no end. There's no end in this process.
No.
But we know we must seek that, and we must draw the path. And that's all we need to know. We don't need to have a goal. No. If within our hearts we know that that is what we have to do, okay, I'll do it. Just
So it's a constant disclosure,
yes.
never-ending disclosure. Thank you. We go to the break. Okay, just very few words about the third path mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, the path of devotion. And a chapter or canto of the Bhagavad Gita is dedicated to the third path, devotion. And too often is the path of bhakti, devotion in Sanskrit, mistaken for an abandonment to an uncontrolled emotionalism. What the real path of bhakti is may be seen from a study of chapter 12 of the Bhagavad Gita. The qualities enumerated must be built into his character by the disciple. And on this path of bhakti, the disciple does all actions not for himself, but for the one loved figure, and acts out of devotion to his beloved master or ideal. For love he acts, for love he speaks and thinks, and so for love he rises swiftly to the goal. Where there is love, no sacrifice can be too great to perform it with joy. There's no sacrifices he cannot make for them with intense joy and the most absolute dedication. On the path of devotion or bhakti, the disciple works a constant withdrawal from the world of the senses and desires, and frequently through meditation he identifies with the higher self, offering his lower personality as a sacrifice on the altar of work. With deep reverence and passionate altruism, almost with divine fanaticism, the disciple lives without a country, a citizen of the world, and even when executing all his duties within society, he remains focused on his supreme ideal. This is the path of bhakti. I invite you to read chapter 12 to see more detail, to know more details about this path. But Krishna will eventually reveal that the imperishable yoga is one and has many paths of access. In each cycle or incarnation, the soul specializes one of them. Of course, one incarnation is not enough to go through all of them, of course. These access paths are several, and the Bhagavad Gita refers to Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, Karma Yoga, the enigmatic path of action called Kriya Yoga by Patanjali, Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion, although it also reveals Dhyani Yoga, the path of meditation, of which Marcela is going to speak now. And Krishna eventually says, the greatest of all yogis brings them all together. We may be far from that goal, okay? But it apparently is like that. So we're going to talk now about the path of meditation.
Thank you. I did some mess here, sorry. Hello again. I thought it might be good for all of us to read passages, and I will try to as Eduardo did, but I'm going to show you more passages and more verses of this path of meditation, which is, I think, one of the most important ones from my point of view, because if we don't meditate, we cannot act properly, we cannot think properly, and so and perhaps the object of our devotion may be wrong. So meditation allows us to find the truth in a quiet, by quieting the mind. And so I'm going to start. Oh, here you are. Thank you, Annie. Okay. Oh, there's an ant in here on the paper. Okay, sorry. Yes, it was. Okay. This is the sixth discourse or chapter 6 of the Gita. Sri Krishna emphasizes once again that the yogi or sannyasin is one who has renounced the fruits of actions, not the actions themselves. Performance of their fruits bring about the purification of the mind. Only a purified mind, a mind free of desires, can engage itself in constant meditation on the Atman or higher self. What does desire do to us? It gives rise to imagination, which drives the soul into the field of action. Therefore, none of us can realize permanent freedom and tranquility of mind without renouncing the desires. Then, what must be done? The lower self, that is to say our personality, must be controlled by the higher self. All the lower impulses of the body, mind and senses must be controlled by the power of the higher self. And then what happens? The higher self becomes one's friend. And then the yogi is perfectly harmonized. Sri Krishna proceeds to give various practical hints as to the practice of meditation. And yesterday we spoke about the steps, but I will keep on track on what the Gita says. And among other suggestions, Sri Krishna advises or suggests practices such as the practice of brahmacharya. We spoke about it yesterday, and I'm going to refer about some other aspect I did not say yesterday. Brahmacharya means to practice moderation in daily life, in eating, in our habits, sleeping, recreation. Yes, so there should be no extremes in our lives. Yes. As I said yesterday, by some mystics, the path has been divided into 3 stages. They are called the path of purification, the path of illumination, and the path of unity. The first 6 chapters of the Gita correspond up to a certain extent or point to the path of purification. Krishna's teachings make it clear to Arjuna that a genuine yogi is not someone who withdraws from the external world, abandoning their family and the circumstances in which karma has placed them. No, a true spiritual aspirant is not defined by elaborate rituals or ceremonies, but rather by their commitment to performing their dharma, their duties and their actions without attachment to the outcomes. The sole motivation is the well-being of all beings within this manifested universe. Now we shall go to, here we are, beautiful picture. Let's go to verse 2. Do you know, O Arjuna, that yoga is what they call renunciation? Truly, no one becomes a yogi if he has not renounced thoughts. In the Gita, of course, Lord Krishna speaks highly about karma yoga. As Eduardo already stated, is one of the paths of spiritual discipline and emphasizes selfless action and performing one's duties without attachment to the results. Perhaps we're insisting a bit on the point, but I think it's very important. And why? Because in the path of meditation, karma yoga is a means or a stepping stone to the yoga of meditation. Why? Because karma yoga is seen as a preparatory stage for higher forms of yoga, particularly this yoga of meditation. In the spiritual journey, individuals often progress through various stages, and karma yoga is considered a foundational practice that helps purify the mind and develop selfless attitudes, setting the stage for meditation. Lord Krishna encourages people to practice karma yoga. This could be because it provides a practical and accessible entry point for individuals on the spiritual path, especially for those who may find it challenging to immediately engage in more contemplative or meditative process. Because we know it's not so easy to say, I am going to meditate. You know what happens to the mind. And we are going to talk about that. Sannyasa traditionally refers to the monastic way of life. But by saying that karma yoga is sannyasa, it could imply that engaging in selfless action and performing one's duties with detachment is akin to the spirit of renunciation. It also suggests that by adopting the principles of karma yoga, one can embody the spirit of renunciation, even while actively participating in worldly affairs. Therefore, it is not the act of work that needs to be renounced, but rather the formative will that pursues self-centered aims. Nobody can become a disciple until the self-centered activities of the aspirant have faded away. It's only when the yogi is firmly established on the path, only then the calmness of meditation can provide a channel for further progress. Let's go to the next one. Verse 4. When a man is not attached to the sense objects or to actions, having renounced all thoughts, then he is said to have attained yoga. Eduardo spoke something about this because it is both easy and common for individuals to mistakenly believe that they have already reached this stage. But actually, this stage is highly sublime. Only those who are firmly established on the path, those who no longer are bound to attachments, to sensory objects, or engage in self-centered activities, can be considered true yogis. They must have surrendered the desire to impose their personal will upon the course of events. When I was preparing this, some other readings I made came into my mind, and I decided to put them here because look at these are the master's words. Beware of pride and egoism, two of the worst snares for the feet of those who aspire to climb the high path of knowledge and spirituality. I think we must, in this path, one of the most important requirements is to be humble. If we are not humble, nothing can move straight forward. Then comes verse 6. The self is the friend of the self for him who has conquered himself by the self. But to the unconquered self, this self stands in the position of an enemy like the external foe. Let's analyze this because it's... I did a translation into Spanish in order to understand what is this? What is Krishna saying here? But it speaks about that the self is a friend who has conquered himself. Yes. But, however, if the personal self drives into a state of despondency, if it pursues his own selfish aims and proclaims its own singularity, then, and this is I found it very interesting, then the Atman is perceived as something hostile. It ceases to be a force of inspiration and instead reveals itself as the enigmatic origin of misfortunes, illnesses, and the so-called blows of fate. In essence, these experiences serve as teachers of the universal truth that all life is one. Now it turns clear. What do you think? Let's go to the next one. Any questions so far? No? Krishna is clear enough. In verse 7.
Sorry.
Yes.
It just reminded me of what once Heraclitus said, the Greek philosopher. The oracle of Delphi does not explain, it just gives hints. So maybe we have such enigmatic statements. They are just hints, they're not explanations as we know.
We just, the process is the same you referred to before. I mean, sometimes we read a statement once and, oh, this is not for me, I cannot follow it, and then we go back and then again, and we study in groups. For me, that's the most important thing to do, not to study on our own, because theosophy is better learned, if the expression may be applied, when we are in groups, and we can, ideas come and go, and so we get into the idea, and afterwards, there comes a moment in which it's like something, comes into our mind or in our heart. I feel more than the heart than the mind, that we understand, and that's all for that moment. And then there will come another level of understanding, which comes with time and with maturity. So where were we? The Supreme Self. The Supreme Self of him who is self-controlled and peaceful is balanced in cold and heat, pleasure and pain, as also in honor and dishonor. Quite a goal to achieve, don't you think? Why? Because the disciple must impartially analyze their own mind and determine if these signs are present in his own being. If the self is indeed controlled and harmonious, then the highest self will be experienced as a gentle scenery to the mind's activities. The pair of opposites, that disturb our other individuals, that is to say, cold and heat, pleasure and pain, honor and dishonor, those will be powerless to disrupt this inner serenity for the yogi. And some other ideas came to my mind while I was preparing this, because when we start this path, all our shining aspects will shine more, and all of our dark sides will be more exposed, and so we have to be aware of that. And for that, HPB and the Voice of the Silence has a beautiful sentence which says, I don't remember, no, I didn't do it in a slide. She says, "Have patience, candidate, as one who fears no failure, courts no success. Fix thy soul gaze upon the star whose ray you are, the flaming star that shines within the lightless depth of ever being, the boundless fields of the unknown. Have perseverance as one who perseveres forever." That's so beautiful. Let's go to the next verses in the Gita. We have two together here, verses 8 and 9. The yogi who is satisfied with the knowledge and the wisdom of the self, that is to say, the higher self, who has conquered all senses, and to whom a cloth of earth, a piece of stone, and gold are the same, is said to be harmonized. He who is of the same mind of the good-hearted friends, enemies, the indifferent, the neutral, the hateful, the relatives, the righteous and the unrighteous excels. I think that these verses are so challenging to us, because they show us, I mean, all the aspects we have to deal, all our non-bright sides, I should say. So, and the Gita says, he who is of the same, what happens to the yogi in this case? Wealth holds no significance for the individual who has glimpsed the one life present in all beings. At this point, the Gita delves into the practice of meditative yoga, providing teachings on the techniques to be followed. Essentially, the method involves gaining such mastery over the workings of the mind that they can be quiet at will, thereby allowing consciousness to calmly perceive the truth. Only brief indications are provided, because the complete process cannot be conveyed in writing. It's a personal one. It's unique for each disciple and must be acquired from the guru, who, at this stage, is available. While many books offer comprehensive instruction for successful meditation, it is essential to consider the practices they recommend, and especially the objectives or results they propose. This includes an assessment on the structure's qualifications, their prior experiences, the kind of life they lead, and whether their instructions focus on the development of the lower cities or psychic powers. We have to be very, not we, but we should take care of that. This is very important. In my years at the TS, many people came we have a meditation group once a week. And there were so many people who came around and wanted to see colors and devas and there was a time when somebody said, well, I don't see anything, and we are supposed to become clairvoyants after this, and said, no, this is not the object of the work. Yes, you laugh, but it's so, it's so common. People are looking for phenomenal experiences, and they don't look into themselves. They don't even think of doing that. And we had that group for almost 10 years, so there were many people coming and, of course, leaving at their first visit. But because they wanted something else, which was not available at the TS. Let's go to verse 10. Oh. Let the yogi try constantly to keep the mind steady, remaining in solitude, alone, with the mind and the body controlled, and free from hope and greed. The first requirement is to find a serene, a quiet location for meditation, free from the disturbance of friends or visitors. The chosen place should be devoid of irritations or distractions. Ideal locations are often outdoors, in contact with nature, where the mind can find serenity and silence. The meditation seat should indeed provide comfort, and the spine should be held erect while the body maintains a relaxed position. However, the most important aspect of meditation is the inner attitude of the disciple. Something about the gaze, because many people think, what am I going to do with my eyes? Shall I put, I had those questions at home, so I'm going to be straightforward. The direction of the gaze can be a source of confusion for many. The best approach is to prevent the mind from wandering, which is why it is advisable to direct the eyes along the line of the nose and then half close the eyelids. This should not be confused with fixing the gaze between the eyebrows, which is often referred to as the center of consciousness, as Buddhi, known as Buddhi, and symbolized by that location. No, let's do things simply at the same time. The breath, this is important, should also be maintained in a regular and smooth manner, as there's a vital link between the flow of thoughts and the rhythm of breath. There's a Chinese quote that says, because breath comes from the heart, and unrhythmical breath comes from the heart's unrest. Therefore, one should breathe in and out softly. In this form of yoga, there's no need for elaborate practices of breath retention and alternate nostril breathing like pranayama. They are not advised at the same time. But that's for some other time. We have to go on. So this is the essence of yoga, leading to detachment from the realm of desires and union with Buddhi yoga, resulting in enlightenment. This state is not the product of some occult mechanism or mental emptiness. It is the center of consciousness that withdraws its attention from external phenomena, whether sensory or mental, passes through the central point, which is itself, and emerges in the spiritual realm of Buddhi. In the deepest truth, it is the same word we spoke about a few minutes ago, perceived in a different way. It is the same word perceived in a different way. It is the same word because, in reality, all words are but illusions. All that exists within the one, and what we see as a word depends upon the point of view from which we see. That which we see is the one. thought is verily the world and therefore should be purified with care. As one thought is, so one becomes. This is the eternal mystery. Do we have... Verse 14. Serene-minded, fearless, firm in the vow of Brahmachari, having controlled the mind, thinking of me and balanced in mind, let him sit, having me as the supreme goal, the higher self, of course. Well, I will speak a little bit about Brahmacharya, or control of the sexual impulse and complete purity of aspiration. Brahmacharya should not be confused with mere celibacy. It refers to the control of sexual impulses rather than their mere inhibition. I think that the most important thing is to not to live a promiscuous life in every aspect, and then we have a certain balance. Because the purity of aspiration and the guidance of a wise guru are only the safeguards against such delusions. Yes. I should go a bit further. Lord Krishna, in verse 13, describes here the effect of oneness. Therefore, it is said that he alone is safe who sees me, the Atman, in all beings and all beings in me. Hence, all the emphasis is placed on the self, the Atman. The yogi must unite with the Atman, the seventh principle, the higher self, with thoughts fixed on the Atman, absorbed in the yoga of the Atman, and see the Atman through the Atman. Any questions up to now, or is it clear enough, I think? Sí, yes, Jorge.
One of the aspects in meditation is that of total desirelessness. If we do not desire anything, there will be no good or bad, up or down. Go right to the point of just being. And it's only at that point that we can meditate where we don't want anything anymore. And thoughts and all those things continue being, but they don't are in the way because we don't desire anything. Do you believe that that's one of the aspects of meditation?
If I believe.
The desirelessness.
Yes. I will speak from my point of view. I think that meditation helps me to feel close to the unity, especially, I mean, to work on my pair of opposites in mind, and in fact it's not like a desire, but it's like a duty. It's the Dharma. I know it has to be done, so as much as it is possible, I try to do it. And whenever we meditate, whenever I meditate, I feel that my mind is out of the way of that the pair of opposites, and I can see things more clear, and feelings like bad feelings or hard feelings against somebody they slowly fade away, because everybody, I mean, it's a process. I don't know, it's a personal process, but one turns to be more compassive, to have an attitude of compassion. And for that, the books, I mean, the Light on the Path, The Voice of the Silence, give such strong or powerful hints that if you meditate on them, then many things can change in your own life. For instance, to criticize people, it's so common in our lives to make comments on people, and then comes words from Light on the Path, which about I don't remember I don't know how to say that in English, but remember the one that speaks about the dirty dress, or the dirty that could have been yours before or will be in the future. So who are we to speak about somebody else? So I think we are in this process. It's like taking away the veils of our worst parts and trying to shine and make shine the better aspects of ourselves. Sometimes we don't know we have them. I don't know if I answered your question, because it's too personal.
Just to clear my question. Whenever we think in normal life, we want something prior to an action. We have a desire. We want to achieve something. But in meditation, I feel that should stop.
Yeah.
Because only then we can achieve meditation.
So does meditation calm the appetites or lower the desires? Is that the question?
Yes, yes, very simply said.
That's the hope. That's the hope.
Yes, Nika.
In the end, the desire itself, it's not good or bad. It's mostly the attachment of the grasping of the result, and that could perpetuate, of course. I think the thoughts themselves are not good or bad, and we don't necessarily need to stop, but just let them be. And as soon as we try to grasp, that's the point when we, in a way, manifest our reality by fixating and crystallizing the phenomena which we ourselves produce. So I think it's more of a grasping than just let go. Let go the outcome, like Krishna would say.
Yes. And somebody else? Okay. I want to Well, the mind verily is restless, turbulent, strong, and unyielding, says Krishna. It says Arjuna, I deem it as difficult to control as to control the wind. Why? Because the mind ever changes its points of concentration from one object to another. So it is restless, strong, and obstinate. It produces agitation in the body and in the senses. And that is why the mind is even more difficult to control than to control the wind. Speaking about the mind and its desires, I think that desires, when they are mixed with a lower mind, they become very good friends, and they try to keep on that track. And the word of desire never ends just because of that. The mind knows what to do, and the desire is always there. I will go a bit faster, otherwise. Well, this is one step. Little by little, let him attain to quietude by the intellect held firmly, having made the mind establish itself in the self. Let him not think of anything. In this stage, the yogi believes that there's no greater pain is possible, and they become unshaken by the assaults of pain and sorrow. Yes. There are two processes here. One is the negative, in which there is a disconnection, and the positive, which is a realization. Yes, and they occur simultaneously. Similar to a person which is climbing a stair and takes one hand and another hand, everything it's a process that happens at the same time. Now, let's see something else to be said. This achievement the yogi does extends throughout the day and even seeps into the hours of sleep. This is an important thing, because we don't need to be yogis too. I mean, if we truly meditate, on what we read or what we want to modify in ourselves, that process extends throughout the day, and constant effort is necessary to maintain to the greatest extent possible the detachment and insight achieved during the meditation period. The disciple should hold firmly throughout the day to whatever level of realization was attained during those calm hours. Even a brief period of uncontrolled thought, an hour of despondency, or just 5 minutes of anger can unravel the progress made. And then, like the web of Penelope, what is woven in the morning can be undone by the next day. So, consistency and diligence in maintaining the practice is of utmost importance. So, this is ringing our bells. In verses 37 and 45, he who is unable to control himself, though he has the faith, and whose mind wanders away from yoga, what end does he meet, having failed to attain perfection in yoga or Krishna? But the yogi who strives with assiduity, purified of sins, and perfected gradually through many births, reaches the highest goals. Well, this is very optimistic, I think, because we know the journey is long and uphill, and sometimes it may be hopeless to the disciple. Progress is very slow, and the goal seems to be very distant from the disciple. And death may come before the goal may be achieved. But one must not despair. The path must be threaded over many lifetimes, and the disciple can lie down peacefully in the knowledge that no effort is ever wasted. Just as a person completes an unfinished task on the following day, the disciple can pick up in the next life from where they left off in this one. So we have to be firm, steady, and every everything we do in this life will be reflected in next life, and we know that. I would like to go a bit faster for you. Do you have some more minutes? Do you mind? 20 minutes more? Is it too much for you? Is it fine? Yes or no?
I have 10 minutes more.
10 minutes more.
But I don't want to.
Okay. Because perhaps you would like to
No, by all means, don't let that affect.
Okay. I will do it. In this stage, with the mind harmonized by yoga, the yogi sees the self abiding in all beings and all beings in the self. He sees the same everywhere. The sense of a separate self with its individual gains and losses, his personal hopes and fears will dissolve. In its place, the disciple will experience the oneness of the Atman, which resides in all beings, perceiving all beings as eddies in the all-pervading ocean of bliss. This stage may be considered as the third significant milestone on the spiritual path, because the bridge that separated the lower self from the higher self has been crossed, and no obstacles remain to prevent the divine light from enlightening the personality with its extraordinary radiance. And we, disciples or aspirants, we may say, but this is very far in the future for me. I need something to help me now. And one way to respond to this concern could be to reflect that each step we take, no matter how small, leads us inexorably in one direction or another, towards the fulfillment of our divine nature or towards its degradation. Those small efforts that may seem insignificant to us if they agree with our best lights at this time, they are surely necessary steps in our evolutionary journey. Krishna's teachings can show us that direction, or our direction. If we understand that they are principles of the universe and of our own nature, then we no longer need to think of them as something that is outside us. Rather, they can become such an important part of our lives that we would no longer need to think about them consistently. Yes, Krishna's teachings can serve as a spontaneous source of truth in every circumstance and situation. The extent to which this occurs is surely the measure of the depth and strength to which they have become ingrained in our own being. If we ignore them, concentrating only on worldly considerations, we will surely be lost. It is only from the source of truth that choice becomes possible. And that's all for today. And any questions, any reflections?
Can you repeat the last part?
Yes, of course.
It is only from the source of truth that choice.
Choiceless choice. There's no other choice but that, the true. It is only from the source of truth that choiceless choice becomes possible. Yes.
You had a verse back, I forget which verse it was.
Let's go back, let's see.
It's a while back. It began something like, to maintain the same mind or a steady mind, no matter whom you're socializing with. I'm just paraphrasing. A good friend, a bad friend.
The pair of opposites.
Yes. What verse is that?
Let me see.
Is it 14? Oh yes, here it is. He
It's
who is of the same mind to the good-hearted friends, enemies, the indifferent, and the unrighteous excels. This is very challenging for me. Okay.
only for you.
I read this quote the other day. I have as many personalities as I have friends. And that just sums me up perfectly. I mean, if you met Dan somewhere else, you wouldn't be the same person. Does meditation, for the moment we're in meditation, I can understand that would change or ameliorate, soften that feeling. But then when meditation ends and we have to deal with the real world, I'm still these different personalities. Is there a meditation effect that would make my mind steady? Or, I mean, that's the hope. Any thoughts on that?
I think everybody, I mean, all of us have that issue. But I think that the best way is, as we spoke yesterday about motives, why do you behave in such a way with A and in another way with B? You must have your motives. But as long as you don't hurt anybody, and you know what you're doing, and if your attitude is based on compassion, love, kindness, nothing can be wrong. Eduardo.
It's not an easy question, but in a way, meditation can be a rehearsal of what should eventually become a permanent attitude. I think we might be talking in terms of what the difference is between a mystical meditation and a truly occult one. This is my view. I'm sorry, you may not share this view. But generally, when those meditations with a strong mystical attitude are very different from those who tend to truly still the mind and focus the mind on a really symbolically high point, a very impersonal point of view. So that the meditation is then a sort of practice, exercise, or rehearsal of the same attitude which we are about to hold the whole day long. And in my opinion, that is a truly occult meditation. And in general, in the occult meditation, the sense of self is lost. In the mystical type of meditation, we generally retain the self because we are enjoying, we are feeling, we are we. But this is only my experience.
I'm the witness in that I feel as though communion is communion, and meditation in its deepest sense is a profound communion where there is no self and no other. Whether it's the occult or the mystic path, they converge. At some point they converge. And it's from that sense of communion that comes no choice, because there's only one life that is being released through the relationship. The relationship itself dissolves, and something else takes its place, and life is liberated.
That would be the goal, I think.
To join the heart and the mind, and but in the end, it has to do with the sense of self that has to, in a way, disappear, and a real sense of unity has to be felt.
Well, Eduardo had mentioned yoga, chitti, vritti, which is the quieting of the mind, really. And I think that the regular practice of that quieting of the mind eventually gets us to a place when we can step back and look at things more look at things with the same eyes, so that the differences start to disappear, or the attachments and repulsions start to quiet down.
This is what I was trying to say to Jorge, that pair of opposites begins to fade, and our gaze is more peaceful and less judgmental. Can we say that? And that's one of the aspects that happens. I mean, you serene your mind, and there's a certain peace that arises that allows you to see things with different eyes, and not from with the eyes of the mind, but of the heart. And I believe that that's the moment when you feel that oneness, or that sense of unity. And the hard task is to keep that feeling all the way through. But I mean, if we stick to the practice, and I think it's possible. It's possible. Okay, time to finish. We'll see you tomorrow again at 10 o'clock.